In the crowded airport, she finds a lost man in a wheelchair. Without hesitation, the humble young woman offers help with tenderness. The millionaire father watches the scene with teary eyes. He never imagined that gesture would change his life. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Now let's continue. Emily gazed at the small cell phone in her hands, its worn edges betraying years of use. It was her only connection to the world beyond the peeling walls of her Chicago suburb apartment. But it had to be sold. Her tired brown eyes, weary from sleepless nights, turned to the room next door, where her mother, Mrs. Susan, breathed with difficulty. The stroke hadn't just stolen her movements, but also the dreams they both shared. At just 23 years old, Emily carried a responsibility that seemed larger than the world on her shoulders. Between the cleaning job she took and caring for her mother, she barely had time to breathe. Money, always scarce, needed to be multiplied like loaves and fishes. Now before her was an opportunity she couldn't let slip away, a position as an assistant at one of the most prestigious beauty salons in New York City. "Honey." Mrs. Susan's weak voice echoed through the narrow hallway. Emily tucked the phone into her pocket and hurried to the room. "I'm here, Mum." She adjusted the pillows and wiped the sweat from the older woman's forehead. "Do you need anything?" Don't sell your phone." Mrs. Susan's eyes, still alert and attentive, met her daughter's. "It's dangerous to be without communication. Mom, I've already talked with Mrs. Betty. She'll take care of you for a few weeks until I get established in New York." Emily held her mother's hand affectionately. "And as soon as I receive my first paycheck, I'll buy another phone. You'll see. Everything will work out." The small two-room apartment held stories of struggles and triumphs. On the walls, some yellowed. Photos showed happier times. Mrs. Susan standing, smiling, embracing her daughter at her high school graduation. Emily spent hours looking at that photo, remembering when her mother could still dance, cook, and work. The next morning, Emily woke before sunrise. She prepared her mother's breakfast, organized the medications in small containers with marked times, and left everything within reach of Mrs. Betty, the neighbor who had agreed to help. The woman, a retiree with gray hair and a kind smile, was the only person Emily trusted in that neighborhood where solidarity had become a luxury item. "Mrs. Betty, are you sure you can stay with her?" Emily asked for the 10th time while packing her small suitcase. "Go with God, girl." The woman smiled, adjusting the shawl on her shoulders. "Your mother will be well cared for. You need to take this chance." Emily hugged her mother for a long time, taking in the soft lavender scent she always wore. "In a few weeks I'll return, Mum, with money for better treatment, a physical therapist, everything you deserve." Mrs. Susan tried to smile, but her eyes filled with tears. Emily gently wiped her mother's face and kissed her forehead. "You are my strength, you always have been. Now it's my time to be strong for you." With the small suitcase in hand and a heavy heart, Emily left the apartment. The phone had been sold the night before, completing the amount needed for the airfare. In her pocket remained only a few coins and a crumpled paper with the address of the salon in New York City. The sun was beginning to tint the sky pink when she crossed the street. The bus to the airport was already arriving, and Emily felt a mixture of fear and hope take over her chest. That journey represented more than a simple change of city. It was the chance to break the cycle of limitations that had imprisoned them for so long. She looked one last time at the simple building where she lived, at the window of the room, where her mother was probably still crying, and made a silent promise. She would return transformed, with enough resources to give her mother the life she deserved. It wasn't just a dream. It was a necessity that burned in her chest with the force of 1,000 suns. O'Hare Airport seemed like a different world. Emily had never been in such an immense and gleaming place. The shiny floor reflected the ceiling lights like stars, and well-dressed people rushed past, dragging brand-name luggage that probably cost more than all her belongings combined. Sitting on a cold metal bench, she watched the flight board. Her heart sank when she saw that her flight was delayed by 3 hours. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten anything since breakfast, saving her last coins for any emergency. The smell of coffee and pastries from nearby cafes was constant torture. That's when she heard a sound of frustration not far away. A boy in a motorized wheelchair seemed to be in trouble. He couldn't have been more than 16 years old, and his hands held a tablet that was clearly out of battery. His face showed a mixture of worry and helplessness. Emily hesitated for a moment. Her coins were precious, but something about that boy touched her deeply. Perhaps because he reminded her of her mother, the same expression of vulnerability she saw every day. "Are you okay?" She approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. The boy raised his eyes, surprised that someone had noticed his predicament. "My dad. He went to buy water and hasn't come back. It's been almost an hour." His voice trembled slightly. "And my wheelchair is out of battery. I can't move." Emily looked around the crowded terminal. It was easy to get lost in that maze of corridors and shops. "What's your name?" "Josh," he answered, trying to maintain composure, but his nervousness was visible. "I'm Emily," she smiled, trying to convey confidence. "Look, I can help you find your dad. I can push your chair." Josh hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Emily used her last coins to buy a bottle of water for him, which he accepted gratefully. As she pushed the chair through the terminal, they talked. Josh was an only child, lived in New York City, and was returning from a medical consultation in Chicago with his father. "Do you like to paint?" Emily asked, noticing the paint stains on the boy's hands. His face lit up. "Love it. It's the only thing that makes me forget." His voice diminished, and Emily understood there was much more to that story than he was willing to share at that moment. After almost half an hour of searching, they heard a commotion. A tall man in a well-cut suit came running in their direction, followed by 2 airport security guards. The man's face was red with worry, but his expression changed to suspicion when he saw Emily pushing his son's chair. "Josh! Thank God!" The man quickly approached, positioning himself between Emily and the wheelchair. "Who are you? What are you doing with my son?" "Dad, calm down," Josh immediately intervened. "This is Emily. She helped me when my chair ran out of battery. She bought water for me and is helping me look for you." The security guards had already surrounded Emily, who felt her face burn with embarrassment. "I just wanted to help." Her voice came out small as one of the guards asked for her identification. "She spent her last coins buying water for me, Dad." Josh continued, defending her. "She was alone, waiting for a delayed flight, and still stopped to help me." The businessman, who introduced himself as Richard Taylor, studied Emily for a few moments. His gaze, previously suspicious, began to soften as he noticed her simple clothes, the small worn suitcase, and especially the sincerity in her eyes. "Is it true that you missed your flight to help my son?" Richard asked, dismissing the security guards with a gesture. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of reality fall on her shoulders. She no longer had money for another ticket, nor a way to return home. Her entire plan was crumbling before her eyes. "Dad," Josh called, his voice firm, despite his age. "We can't leave her like this. She was the only person in this entire airport who stopped to help me. Everyone else passed by, pretending not to see me." Richard Taylor adjusted his tie, thoughtful. The airport security cameras had recorded the entire scene. A simple young woman using her last coins to help a stranger, expecting nothing in return. It was the kind of kindness he hadn't seen in a long time. The video from the airport security cameras went viral on social media within hours. The images showed Emily, with her small, worn suitcase, buying water with her last coins and pushing Josh's chair through the endless corridors. The contrast between her simplicity and the luxurious airport environment touched the hearts of thousands of people. Richard Taylor observed the reactions on social media on his laptop, sitting in his spacious living room in Upper East Side. Josh was next to him, anxious, while Emily remained quiet on the sofa, still trying to process the sudden turn her life had taken in the last 24 hours. After the encounter at the airport, Richard had not only purchased a new ticket for her, but had insisted that she come to dinner at his house to talk. Emily tried to refuse. She was embarrassed, confused, and worried about her mother, but Josh was insistent, and there was something in the boy's gaze that prevented her from saying no. "More than 200,000 shares," Richard murmured, adjusting his reading glasses. "People are tired of seeing indifference. Your gesture, Emily, touched something deep in people. Emily shifted, uncomfortable with the attention. I just did what anyone would do. But no one did, Josh interrupted, his eyes shining with surprising intensity. I was there for almost an hour. Hundreds of people passed by me. Some even looked at me but kept walking. Dinner was served on the spacious terrace overlooking Central Park. Emily could hardly believe the sophisticated menu before her, so different from the rice and beans she usually ate. Between bites, the stories began to flow naturally. Josh talked about the accident that left him paraplegic 2 years ago. His voice faltered when speaking about how he abandoned painting, his passion since childhood. The brushes were still kept in a box in his room, untouched since then. Richard, in turn, spoke about the challenges of being a single father, dividing himself between the presidency of his technology company and caring for Josh. His eyes watered when mentioning how his son had closed himself off from the world after the accident, refusing to participate in social activities or resume his hobbies. That's when Emily, encouraged by the atmosphere of confidences, shared her own story. She spoke about her mother, about how the stroke had changed their lives, about the sleepless nights, the overdue bills, the daily struggle to maintain dignity. "And you left your mother to come work in New York?" Richard asked, his tone more curious than judgmental. "With Mrs. Betty, a neighbor." Emily lowered her eyes to her plate, guilt weighing on her chest. "She promised to take care of my mother for a few weeks until I could get established here and send money." "And this job at the salon?" Josh questioned, leaning forward with interest. "Is it guaranteed?" Emily hesitated. "Well, a client of the house where I used to clean recommended me. She said the salon needs an assistant." But her voice failed. "I haven't gone there yet. With all this delay in the flight." Richard and Josh exchanged a significant look. The businessman wiped his lips with the linen napkin and straightened up in his chair, his expression softening. "Emily, perhaps the universe has other plans for you," he began cautiously. "Josh needs a therapeutic companion, someone who can be with him during the day, help him with activities, encourage him to resume his life. I've been looking for the right person for months." Emily blinked, surprised. "But I don't have training for that. I don't know anything about—" "You have something more valuable than any diploma," Josh interrupted, his eyes shining in a way that Richard hadn't seen in a long time. "You have genuine empathy. You saw me when no one else did." Richard nodded, continuing, "We can arrange technical training for you in physical therapy. I know an excellent school here in New York. You could work with Josh during the day and study at night. The salary would be more than enough to bring your mother here and provide adequate treatment for her." Emily felt the world spin. It was a lot to process. Her mind went back to the small apartment in Chicago, to her mother, to the plans she had made. But something in Josh's look, a mixture of hope and plea, made her reconsider everything. She began, her voice trembling slightly. "I would need to talk to my mother first, and with Mrs. Betty. I can't just—" "Of course," Richard gently interrupted her. "Take your time to think, but know that the offer stands. Josh needs someone like you, and something tells me that you need us too." The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with orange hues that reflected on the windows of the buildings. Emily observed the city skyline below, thinking about how life could change in a matter of hours. From a house cleaner with no resources to a potential therapeutic companion with a chance to study and give her mother a better life. That night, lying in the bed of the guest room in the Taylor's mansion, Emily couldn't sleep. Her heart was divided between the fear of the unknown and the hope for a better future. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream of possibilities that previously seemed unreachable. Emily's adaptation to the new routine was a mix of challenges and discoveries. Her mornings now began early in the Taylor's penthouse, helping Josh with his morning routine. The boy, initially reserved, gradually began to open up, revealing a sharp sense of humor and acute intelligence that isolation had masked. "Have you thought about returning to painting?" Emily asked one morning, while organizing Josh's school materials. Her eyes had fixed on the dusty box of art supplies in the corner of the room. Josh looked away, focusing on the landscape through the window. "I can't hold the brushes like before." "And who said it needs to be like before?" Emily approached the box, taking out some brushes. Sometimes a new way of doing things can surprise us. That afternoon, after online classes, Emily prepared a surprise. With Richard's help, who observed everything with a mixture of curiosity and hope, she transformed the terrace into a small studio. Adapted easel, brushes with special handles, paints arranged in an accessible way. "Emily, I don't know." Josh hesitated, his hands trembling slightly on the wheels of his chair. "Just try," she encouraged, adjusting the height of the easel. "It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be like it was before. It just needs to be yours." The first attempts were frustrating. Smudged paints, imprecise strokes, tears of anger that Josh tried to hide. But Emily remained there, patient, suggesting adaptations, celebrating each small progress. Richard observed these interactions from afar, feeling something awaken in his chest that had long been dormant. Hope. His son, who had spent the last 2 years immersed in silence and apathy, was slowly emerging from his shell. Meanwhile, Emily divided her time between caring for Josh and the physical therapy technical course that Richard had arranged. The study, nights were intense, but each new knowledge acquired made her feel closer to her goal of helping not only Josh but also her mother. The daily conversations with Mrs. Susan, now possible thanks to the new phone that Richard had insisted on giving her, were the fuel Emily needed to move forward. Her mother, even with speech still compromised, showed pride in each of her daughter's achievements. "Mom, you won't believe," Emily excitedly recounted during a video call. "Josh started painting again, and do you know what he's doing? A portrait of you based on the photo I showed him." On the other end of the line, Mrs. Susan smiled, her eyes shining with contained tears. "He is a good boy," she articulated slowly. "Yes, he is, Mom, and soon you'll meet him in person. Richard is already making arrangements to bring you here." The news of Mrs. Susan's transfer to New York was making Emily anxious. Richard had found a specialized rehabilitation center with a complete multidisciplinary team. It was more than Emily had ever dreamed of being able to provide for her mother. One afternoon, while helping Josh with his physical therapy exercises, in the heated pool, Emily noticed something different about the boy. His movements were more confident, and there was a particular sparkle in his eyes. "You know, Emily," he began, while practicing strengthening movements, "before you arrived, I thought my life had ended in that chair, that I would never be able to do anything meaningful again." Emily continued supporting his movements in the water, listening attentively. "But you showed me that life doesn't stop, it just changes direction." Josh paused, gathering courage. "I want to go back to school, not just online. I want to attend classes in person." The declaration caught Emily by surprise. It was a huge step for someone who just a few months ago even refused to leave the Say house. "Are you sure?" "I am, and I want you to help me convince my dad." Josh smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his entire face. "He's going to freak out at first, but if there's one person who can make him understand, that person is you." Emily felt her heart warm. In a few weeks, that boy had become much more than a patient. He was a friend, almost a younger brother. And seeing him regain his confidence, his desire to live, was the greatest reward she could receive. The news came like lightning on a sunny day. Emily was helping Josh with his morning exercises when her cell phone rang. It was Mrs. Betty, her voice trembling on the other end of the line. "Emily, my child, your mother." The woman's voice failed. "I had to leave for a few days to take care of my sister, who had an emergency. I thought it would be quick, but when I returned..." Emily's blood froze. "What happened to my mother, Mrs. Betty?" "The neighbor in 302 told me that your mother has been alone for 3 days. I tried to arrange for someone to stay with her." But Emily felt the world spin. Josh, noticing her distress, moved his wheelchair closer. "Emily?" he called, concerned. "What happened?" With trembling hands, Emily explained the situation. Josh immediately took his tablet and began making calls, while Emily tried to stay calm to think about what to do. Richard found them in this state when he arrived for lunch. In a matter of minutes, after understanding the situation, he was already in his office, making a series of phone calls. "Emily," he called after a few calls, "I've contacted a home care company in Chicago. They're sending a nurse right now for your mother, and I've already arranged a private jet to bring Mrs. Susan. Tomorrow morning." The tears Emily had been holding finally rolled down. "Richard, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. You have done so much for Josh." He paused, choosing his words. "Emily, you are already part of this family." Josh smiled, holding Emily's hand. "And family takes care of each other." The next 24 hours were an emotional roller coaster. The nurse sent by Richard confirmed that Mrs. Susan was dehydrated and frail, but stable. Emily spent the night awake, alternating between calls with the nurse and preparations for her mother's arrival. The next morning, the helipad of the most prestigious hospital in New York was ready to receive the jet with Mrs. Susan. Emily waited anxiously, along with Richard and Josh, when an elegant figure approached them. "Richard, darling, what a surprise to find you here." The melodious voice belonged to a tall woman with perfectly arranged hair and very high heels. Emily noticed Josh instantly become tense. "Patricia," Richard responded dryly. "What are you doing here?" "I'm a member of the hospital board, remember?" She smiled, her eyes fixing on Emily. "And who is this girl?" "This is Emily," Josh stepped forward, his voice carrying a surprising firmness. "My therapeutic companion and friend." Patricia raised a perfectly outlined eyebrow. "Ah, yes, the airport heroine. I saw the video, of course. What a convenient story." The tone of insinuation in her voice made Emily shrink internally, but before she could respond, the sound of the helicopter blades filled the air. The next few minutes were pure emotion. Mrs. Susan, still fragile but conscious, was transferred, with all care, to the hospital. Her eyes filled with tears upon seeing her daughter, and when they landed on Josh, sitting in his wheelchair next to Emily, a small smile appeared on her lips. "Welcome to New York, Mrs. Susan," Josh said, his voice gentle. "You have no idea how much Emily talks about you." Mrs. Susan tried to form words, but it was still difficult. Emily held her hand, conveying all the love and relief she felt. "What a touching scene," Patricia commented, her voice distilling irony. "Richard, can we talk in private?" Richard hesitated, but ended up following Patricia to a more distant corner. Emily could feel the looks of the two in her direction, and something in her stomach contracted. "Don't mind her," Josh whispered. "Patricia is my dad's ex-girlfriend. She never accepted the end of the relationship." Emily nodded, but a feeling of discomfort persisted. There was something in Patricia's look that worried her, as if she were plotting something. While the doctors examined Mrs. Susan and defined her treatment plan, Emily remained by her mother's side, with Josh always nearby. Richard alternated between resolving administrative issues and checking on how they were doing, but Emily noticed that he seemed worried after the conversation with Patricia. At the end of that afternoon, when Mrs. Susan finally slept in the luxurious hospital room, Emily found a moment to thank Josh and Richard. "You had no obligation," she began, but Richard interrupted her. "Emily, when you helped Josh at that airport, you had no obligation either. Sometimes, the best families are those we choose to form." Josh smiled, agreeing with his father, but his eyes showed concern. He had noticed Patricia's looks, the way she observed each interaction between his father and Emily. A shadow projected over the happiness of that moment, and Josh had the feeling that Patricia would not leave things as they were. The following weeks brought a new routine for everyone. Mrs. Susan progressed steadily with intensive treatment, gradually regaining some movements and improving her speech. Emily divided her time between caring for her mother, activities with Josh, and her physical therapy studies. Mrs. Susan's hospital room had become a peculiar meeting point. Josh spent hours there, painting while talking with her, even with difficulties. In speech, Mrs. Susan had a special way of communicating with the boy, through looks and smiles that were worth more than 1,000 words. "You know, Mrs. Susan," Josh commented one afternoon, while finalizing another one of his paintings, "you remind me a lot of my mom." She also had that gentle look. Emily, who was organizing her mother's medications, paused for a moment. It was the first time Josh had mentioned his mother spontaneously. Mrs. Susan extended her trembling hand, touching Josh's arm. "You are an angel," she articulated slowly, making the boy smile with tears in his eyes. Richard observed these interactions with a mixture of emotion and gratitude. Seeing his son opening up again, creating bonds, returning to painting, it was more than he dared to hope for a few months ago. One morning, while Emily was helping Josh with his exercises in the pool, Richard appeared with an unexpected proposal. "What do you think about all of us going to the beach this weekend?" he suggested, showing a brochure. "I discovered an accessibility project at Coney Island. They have amphibious chairs that allow you to enter the sea safely." Josh's eyes widened. "In the sea, for real? Only if you want to, son. And of course if Emily and Mrs. Susan want to join us." Josh's smile lit up his entire face. "Emily, you'll come, right? And bring Mrs. Susan too?" "Of course," she replied, moved by the boy's joy. "It will do my mother good to get some sun." Saturday dawned with a perfectly blue sky. Richard had arranged all the necessary support, adapted beach chairs, umbrella, snacks, and even a nurse to assist Mrs. Susan. The beach was relatively quiet that morning. Josh, anxious, could hardly wait to try the amphibious chair. Emily helped him with the transfer, while Richard supervised everything attentively. "Are you afraid?" Emily asked, noticing a slight tremor in Josh's hands. "A little," he admitted. "But it's a good fear, you know, like when you're about to do something important." With the help of the project instructors, Josh was taken to the water. The moment the waves touched his feet brought such a pure smile to his face that Emily felt her eyes water. From the house, Mrs. Susan observed everything with bright eyes. She squeezed Emily's hand, who was sitting by her side, and pointed to Josh. "Happy," she managed to say, and Emily perfectly understood what her mother wanted to express. Josh was truly happy, perhaps for the first time since the accident. Richard took photos and filmed each moment, his own emotions showing on his usually contained face. At one point, he sat down next to Emily and Mrs. Susan. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice choked, "for bringing life back to our family." Emily felt her heart accelerate with those words. Family, that's what they had become, an unlikely family, united by fate and strengthened by mutual love and care. The day at the beach extended until sunset. Josh was exhausted, but happy. He had gone into the sea 3 times and was already talking about returning next weekend. Mrs. Susan had napped under the umbrella, but her face showed a serenity that Emily hadn't seen in a long time. While organizing things to leave, Emily noticed some curious looks from people around them. Some had recognized the group from the viral airport video, but unlike the previous weeks, now they weren't looks of pity or empty curiosity. They were looks of admiration for a family that had found strength in their differences and love in their difficulties. On the way back home, with Josh sleeping, in the back seat of the adapted van and Mrs. Susan smiling softly, Emily thought about how life could be surprising. A few months ago, she was desperate at an airport, not knowing what the future held. Now she was there, surrounded by people who had become fundamental in her life. The annual charity event at the hospital was in full preparation. Richard, as one of the main donors, had been invited to give a speech about accessibility and inclusion. The experience with Josh had transformed him into a passionate advocate for the cause, and he planned to announce the creation of a foundation dedicated to helping people with disabilities and their caregivers. Emily helped Josh get ready for the event, adjusting his bow tie while he finalized the last details of a special painting, a picture that portrayed his journey of overcoming, which would be auctioned during the event with proceeds going to the hospital. "Do you think people will like it?" Josh asked, his brush giving the final touches to the canvas. "It's impossible not to like it," Emily smiled, admiring the work. The painting showed a wheelchair transformed into butterfly wings, with vibrant colors emerging from an initially dark background. "It's your story, Josh, and it's a story of hope." Richard appeared at the door of the room, impeccable in his tuxedo. "Are you ready? Mrs. Susan is already waiting for us in the car." The five-star hotel's ballroom was dazzling. Mrs. Susan, in her adapted wheelchair, wearing an elegant navy blue dress chosen by Emily, observed everything with amazed eyes. Her recovery in recent months had been remarkable. Now she could form short sentences and move her right arm with more precision. "Beautiful it's party," she commented, while Emily adjusted her shawl. The buzz in the room diminished when Richard took the stage for his speech. He spoke passionately about how an encounter at the airport had changed not only his son's life, but also his own perspective on what it meant to be truly human. "Today, I'm proud to announce the creation of the Butterfly Wings Foundation," he declared, his eyes finding Josh's in the audience. "Their project born from love, empathy, and the certainty that everyone deserves the chance to fly." The applause was warm, but was interrupted by a familiar voice. "What a moving story, Richard." Patricia approached the stage, a calculated smile on her lips. "But does everyone know the complete story?" A murmur ran through the hall. Patricia, elegant in her red dress, held a folder in her hands. "I have some interesting documents here about our airport heroine." She cast a cold look in Emily's direction. "Would the hospital board like to know about certain inconsistencies?" Josh immediately moved his chair forward, positioning himself between Emily and Patricia. "Stop this. You have no right." "I have every right, dear." Patricia opened the folder. "For example, did you know that our young savior has a history of convenient approaches to influential people? I have very interesting records here." Richard descended from the stage, his expression serious. "Patricia, this is neither the time nor the place." "On the contrary, Richard, this is exactly the time." She raised some papers. "These are supposed work references, all falsified. Our young housekeeper has a special talent for creating moving stories." Emily felt her blood freeze in her veins. The references, she had indeed created some false ones years ago, desperate to find work after her mother's stroke, a mistake from the past that now came back to haunt her. Emily began, but her voice failed. "Honey." Mrs. Susan extended her trembling hand toward her, feeling her anguish. Josh, however, did not remain silent. With a strength that surprised everyone, his voice cut through the embarrassing silence of the hall. "You want to talk about truths, Patricia? Then let's talk about how you tried to prevent me from going back to school, about how you told my dad that I would never be able to have a normal life again, about how you wanted to send me to an institution." Richard paled. "What?" "I overheard your conversations," Josh continued, tears of anger in his eyes. "You said I was a burden, that I was destroying my dad's life. Is that why he broke up with you, wasn't it?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Patricia, for the first time, seemed to have lost her words. "Emily may have made mistakes in the past," Josh proceeded, his voice more controlled now. "But she gave me back the will to live. She showed me that I could still dream, create, be happy. What have you ever done for anyone besides yourself?" Mrs. Susan, in a visible effort, raised herself slightly in her chair. "My daughter is light," she pronounced, each word clear and strong, surprising everyone. "Light that illuminates others." The emotion in Mrs. Susan's words was palpable. Emily, with tears in her eyes, held her mother's hand, finding in her the strength she needed to face her past. The hall remained silent as Emily stood up, her hands still intertwined with her mother's. Her eyes met Richard's, and in them there was no condemnation, only a silent question. "It's true," she admitted, her voice low but firm. "When my mother had the stroke, I was desperate. No one wanted to hire a young woman who needed to be absent constantly to care for her sick mother, so I created false references. It was wrong, I know, but at that time it seemed the only way out. Richard approached slowly. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I was ashamed, because after I met you, after I saw the trust you placed in me, I didn't want that mistake from the past to taint all the good we've built. Josh moved his chair closer to Emily. Dad, you always taught me that what matters is not where we come from, but where we're going. Emily made a mistake, but look at everything she's done for us. Look how she's changed our lives. Patricia let out a dry laugh. How touching. But the hospital board needs to know what kind of person is... The board, Richard interrupted her, his voice loaded with authority, needs to know what kind of person tries to destroy a young woman who has only brought good to others. What kind of person tries to taint a charity event with personal vengeance? He turned to those present, his posture firm. Yes, Emily made mistakes in the past. Who here hasn't? But she transformed those mistakes into lessons and used her experience to help others. My son returned to painting, to smiling, to dreaming. Mrs. Susan is recovering, and He paused, looking directly at Emily. I rediscovered what it's like to have a complete family. A positive murmur began to run through the hall. An elderly lady, a board member, approached Emily. Dear, she said, her voice gentle, sometimes we need to make difficult choices to protect those we love. What matters is what we do afterwards, how we grow from it. Josh, with a mischievous smile, added, and speaking of growing, Dad, I think it's time to show the surprise. Richard nodded, returning to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, as I was saying before we were interrupted, the Butterfly Wings Foundation is born today with a clear mission: to give opportunities to those who need them. And I have the pleasure of announcing that our first coordinator will be Emily Sanders. Emily's eyes widened. What? You understand like no one else what it's like to fight against limitations, Emily. Your experience, your empathy, your strength. It's exactly what we need to make a difference in the lives of other people. Patricia, realizing she had lost control of the situation, tried one last card. This is ridiculous. She doesn't even have proper training. Not yet, Richard smiled. But in 3 months she graduates from the technical course with the best grades in the class. And she's already enrolled for physical therapy college next semester. People began to applaud. Josh raised his painting, which would be auctioned. And this is just the first of many stories we will transform together. Mrs. Susan, with tears in her eyes, managed to form a complete sentence. My daughter always knew that you would fly high. Emily hugged her mother, feeling as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Her past was no longer a threatening shadow. It was just part of her story, a story of overcoming and love. The auction of Josh's painting was a resounding success. The painting of the wheelchair, transformed into butterfly wings, touched the hearts of many present, generating a fierce bidding war. The final value exceeded all expectations and would be entirely destined for the new foundation. As the night progressed, Emily observed her new family. Josh, animated, explained the meaning of his painting to an interested group. Richard talked with board members about the foundation's future projects, and her mother, Mrs. Susan, smiled serenely, her eyes shining with pride. Patricia had discreetly left the event, her attempts at revenge transformed into an even greater impulse for the foundation's success. Sometimes, reflected Emily, one needs to face the storm to see the rainbow that comes after. The days that followed the charity event brought significant changes for everyone. The Butterfly Wings Foundation gained prominence in the media, and the stories of Emily and Josh inspired more and more people. The original airport video gained new life on social media, now accompanied by images of Josh's emotional speech at the event. Emily divided her time between preparations for her graduation from the technical course, caring for Josh and her mother, and initial meetings of the foundation. During one of these busy mornings, she found Josh concentrated on his new project, a series of paintings portraying different stories of overcoming. Look at this one, he showed, proud. It was a vibrant painting depicting a woman in a wheelchair teaching ballet to children. I met her through the foundation. She was a professional ballerina, and after an accident, reinvented her way of dancing and teaching. Emily smiled, admiring the delicate details of the painting. Your strokes are becoming more confident, Josh. You improve every day. It's because now I understand that I don't need to paint like before, he replied, cleaning the brushes. I can create my own style, my own form of expression. Richard entered the improvised studio, carrying a folder of documents. Emily, we have a surprise for you. She turned, curious. Richard extended some papers toward her. These are the documents for your enrollment in physical therapy college. We managed to get a full scholarship through the foundation. Emily took the papers with trembling hands. It was her dream becoming reality. Richard, I don't know what to say. Say you'll continue transforming lives, Josh suggested, smiling, like you transformed ours. That same day, during Mrs. Susan's physical therapy session, an even bigger surprise was waiting. Emily's mother, who had been constantly progressing in her treatment, managed to take her first steps supported by the parallel bars. My turn to surprise. You, Mrs. Susan said, breathless but determined as Emily supported her with tears in her eyes. Josh filmed everything with his tablet, his own emotion evident in his voice. Mrs. Susan, you're amazing. The news of Mrs. Susan's recovery spread quickly among the rehabilitation center staff. Many came to visit her, inspired by her determination. Emily noticed how her mother had become a kind of maternal figure for several patients, always with a smile and a word of encouragement, even when words still came with difficulty. One afternoon, while organizing materials for a foundation meeting, Emily received an unexpected call. It was from the beauty salon where she had originally intended to work when she arrived in New York. Emily, this is Amanda from Nouvelle Beauty Institute. I know your life has taken a different turn, but we'd like to make a proposal. Intrigued, Emily listened as Amanda explained that the salon wanted to establish a partnership with the Butterfly Wings Foundation. The idea was to create a professional training program for people with disabilities in the beauty area. We thought of you. To coordinate the project, Amanda concluded, your experience with the foundation and your personal story would be inspiring for the students. Emily felt her heart quicken. It was as if the universe was connecting all the dots of her journey in a way she could never have imagined. Can I think about it a bit? She asked, already visualizing the possibilities. When she shared the news with Josh and Richard during dinner, she was met with enthusiasm. It's perfect, Josh exclaimed. You can use your experience at the foundation and still realize your original dream of working with beauty. Richard agreed, thoughtful. We could expand the project to other salons, create a network of opportunities. Mrs. Susan, who now actively participated in conversations at the table, added with her increasingly clear speech, my daughter, building bridges. Emily looked at her improvised family, her young friend who had overcome so much, the businessman who had opened his heart and his home, her mother who was bravely fighting to recover. Each one had contributed to her journey in a unique and special way. You know what? She said, smiling. I think I've found my true purpose. It's not just about caring for people or creating opportunities. It's about showing that we all have wings. Some just need help discovering how to use them. Josh grabbed his brushes, inspired. That gave me an idea for a new series of paintings. I'll call it Discovering Wings. Richard observed the scene with a serene smile. The house that once seemed so empty and silent now overflowed with life, projects, and dreams. Emily had brought more than help. She had brought hope. The partnership between the Butterfly Wings Foundation and Nouvelle Beauty Institute quickly became a successful pilot project. Emily coordinated the training program with the same dedication she had demonstrated in everything she did. The first classes were small, but each student brought a unique story of overcoming. On a particularly busy morning, while Emily was organizing material for another class, a young woman in a wheelchair arrived early. She had colorful hair and a shy smile. Hi, I'm Julia, she introduced herself. I saw your video. The one from the airport and then the one from the charity event. That's why I signed up for the course. Emily smiled, remembering how it all began. It's amazing how a small gesture can change so many lives, isn't it? It wasn't a small gesture, Julia corrected. It was an act of love. And that's what we want to learn here. Not just beauty techniques, but how to make a difference in people's lives. The class arrived little by little. There were people with different types of disabilities, all united by the desire to rebuild their lives professionally. Josh often appeared in the classes, painting portraits of the students that would later decorate the institute's walls. Each portrait tells a story, he explained to curious onlookers who stopped to admire his work. And each story is proof that there are no limits when you have determination. Mrs. Susan also became a constant presence at the institute. Her recovery continued to surprise doctors, and now she helped as a volunteer, providing emotional support to students who faced moments of doubt or discouragement. When I couldn't speak, she shared, her diction improving every day, Emily had taught me that silence is also strength. Richard, in turn, was expanding the horizons of the foundation. After the success of the program at Nouvelle Institute, other establishments began to show interest in similar partnerships. The idea of inclusion and professional training was gaining strength in different sectors. We need to think big, he said during a strategic meeting. Imagine how many people we can impact if we expand this model to other areas beyond beauty. Emily observed everything with a mixture of gratitude and responsibility. Each new student who arrived, each story of overcoming she heard, reinforced her certainty that she was on the right path. One afternoon, while helping Julia adapt makeup techniques to her specific condition, Emily received a message on her cell phone. It was a photo from Josh, showing his newest painting. An immense mural at the entrance of the institute, depicting different professionals with disabilities in action. Hairdressers, makeup artists, manicurists, all working with smiles on their faces. This is how I see our future, Josh's message said. A place where differences are not barriers, but bridges to new possibilities. Emily showed the photo to Julia, who became emotional. You know what impresses me the most, the young woman commented. It's how you transformed a story that could have been sad into something so beautiful and inspiring. Life is like that, Emily replied, helping Julia adjust the makeup brush in her hand. Sometimes we need to fall to discover that we can fly. At the end of that day, after all the students had left, Emily found a small painting resting on her desk. It was a new painting by Josh, showing her and her mother at the airport on the day when it all began. But now in the painting, their figures were surrounded by colorful butterflies, each representing a life that had been touched by their journey. Next to the painting, there was a note from Richard. Sometimes a small act of kindness is like a seed. We never know how many flowers it will make bloom. Emily held the painting against her chest, feeling how her heart overflowed with emotion. From a desperate young cleaner to a transformation agent in the lives of so many people, her journey was living proof that love, when multiplied, has the power to change the world. Classes at the physical therapy college had begun, and Emily found herself in a new phase of challenges. Balancing studies with work at the foundation and caring for Josh and her mother required meticulous organization, but there was something different now. She was no longer alone on this journey. One morning, while studying anatomy on the tailor's terrace, Emily was surprised by Josh, who arrived silently in his motorized chair. I have a proposal for you, he announced, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. I want to go back to school, not just online, but in person, and I want you to help me convince my dad. Emily put the book aside, giving him her full attention. Are you sure, Josh? It's an important step. I've never been so sure, he replied, adjusting his posture in the chair. Seeing you study, chasing your dreams, I realize that I also need to move forward. I can't stay hidden at home forever. That evening, during dinner, Josh presented his decision to Richard. The businessman became visibly tense, his paternal concern evident in every word. Son, are you sure? People can be cruel sometimes, and I don't want you to suffer. Dad, Josh replied with surprising maturity, Emily taught me that we can't let fear prevent us from living. Remember when we returned to the beach for the first time? I was terrified, but it was one of the best experiences of my life. Mrs. Susan, who could now actively participate in conversations, added, fear only exists until we take the first step. Richard looked at Emily, seeking her opinion. She smiled, encouraging. Josh is ready, Richard. He's grown so much these months, and besides, the school he chose has an exemplary inclusion program. After much conversation and planning, the decision was made. Josh would return to school next semester. But before that, there was another challenge ahead, a para-sports competition for which he had been secretly training. I want to prove to myself that I can do this, he explained, showing the event brochure. It's a hand cycle race. I've been training with the Foundation's instructor for months. Emily was surprised. She didn't know about this secret project of Josh's. The shy boy she had met at the airport was transforming into a determined young man full of goals. The news of Josh's participation in the competition energized the entire family. Richard hired a specialized trainer, and mornings at the tailor's house gained a new routine. Emily adapted her schedule to accompany the training sessions, applying her knowledge of physical therapy to help with her friend's physical conditioning. Mrs. Susan had become Josh's biggest fan. Every morning, she greeted him with words of encouragement. Today, you'll go further. The training was intense, and there were moments of discouragement. On a particularly difficult afternoon, after an exhausting session, Josh unburdened his insecurities. What if I can't do it? What if I make a fool of myself in front of everyone? Emily knelt beside his chair, holding his hands. Josh, remember what you told me when I started college, that the important thing isn't to be the best, but to give your best. I remember, he smiled, wiping away a stubborn tear. Well, that's what you're doing. Each day of training, each drop of sweat is a victory. Just by being in the competition, you're already proving that it's possible to overcome limits. Richard, who observed the scene from afar, felt his heart tighten with emotion. Emily had become much more than a caregiver. She was a true sister to Josh, someone who understood him and encouraged him to grow. One night, while Emily was organizing her study materials, Richard sought her out in her room. You changed. Our lives, you know that, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Before you appeared, I lived in fear. Fear that Josh would never be happy again. Fear of not being a good father. Fear of the future. Emily put the books aside, moved by the confession. And now? She asked softly. Now? Richard smiled. Now I see my son training for a competition, making plans to return to school, painting pictures that move people. I see your mother regaining movements that doctors said were impossible. I see you chasing your dreams, inspiring others to do the same. He paused, choosing his words. Emily, you didn't just bring care to our family. You brought hope, and that is priceless. Outside the room, Josh smiled, his chair silent in the dark hallway. In his hands, a sketch of his next painting, a portrait of the family that fate had gifted him, united not by blood, but by love and the courage to start anew. The day of the parasports competition dawned with a perfectly blue sky. The venue was full of athletes, family members, and supporters, creating a vibrant atmosphere of overcoming and determination. Josh, in his uniform specially designed for the occasion, tried to control his nervousness while Emily helped him with the final adjustments to the hand cycle. Richard walked from one side to the other, alternating between taking photos and checking if everything was in order. Breathe deeply, Emily instructed, adjusting Josh's helmet. Remember what we trained for. It's not about winning, it's about surpassing your own limits. Mrs. Susan, seated in her adapted chair, held a colorful banner that she had made with the help of other patients from the rehabilitation center. Fly, Josh. The young athlete looked around, absorbing the moment. Other competitors were preparing, each with their unique story of overcoming. Some came to greet him, recognizing him from the viral videos and the Foundation's actions. "You inspired us to try too," said one of the athletes, a middle-aged man who had lost the movement of his legs in an accident. "Your story showed that there's always a new beginning." Emily observed the interactions with a heart full of pride. Josh was no longer that frightened boy from the airport. He had transformed into a symbol of hope for many. The start approached. Richard came close to his son, adjusting the safety equipment one last time. "Son," he said, his voice choked, "no matter the result, you're already a champion for being here." Josh smiled, his eyes shining with determination. "Dad, remember when Emily appeared in our lives? Everyone thought it was coincidence, but I always knew it was destiny. Today I want to prove that that encounter at the airport was just the beginning of our story of overcoming." The competitors were called to the starting line. The course wasn't the easiest, 3 kilometers with terrain variations that would test not only physical strength, but mainly mental strength of the athletes. Emily, Richard, and Mrs. Susan positioned themselves in the stands. Around them, other students from the Foundation and from Nouvelle Institute joined to cheer, transforming that piece of the stands into a festival of colors and smiles. The starting shot sounded, and the race began. Josh maintained a constant rhythm as they had trained, concentrating on his own performance without letting himself be affected by the position of the other competitors. "Look at his posture," Emily commented to Richard, her voice loaded with pride. "All those strengthening exercises are making a difference." Halfway through the course, Josh faced the most challenging stretch, a gentle but prolonged climb that would test his endurance. That's when something unexpected happened. Instead of slowing down, he accelerated. "He's flying!" Mrs. Susan exclaimed, her voice clearer than ever. And he really seemed to be. Josh pedaled with a determination that was contagious to everyone. Each movement was precise. Each turn of the hand cycle seemed to carry not only physical strength, but all the stories of overcoming that had reached this point. The last curve of the course approached. Josh was among the first placed, his concentration absolute. In the stands, Emily held Mrs. Susan's hand, both with tears in their eyes. The moment of arrival was electrifying. Josh crossed the finish line in 3rd place, but his expression was one of pure victory. It wasn't just a medal he had conquered. It was living proof that limits exist only to be surpassed. Richard ran to embrace his son, not caring about the tears that freely rolled down his face. Emily and Mrs. Susan joined the celebration, transforming that moment into an explosion of joy and emotion. "I did it," Josh whispered, exhausted but happy. "We did it together." As the award ceremony took place, Emily observed the scene with a serene smile. There was her unlikely family, a businessman who learned to see beyond appearances, a young man who discovered his inner strength, a lady who didn't give up on starting over, and herself, a simple housekeeper who had the courage to believe in better days. "You know what makes me happiest?" Josh commented later, his medal shining on his chest. "It's seeing how our story is inspiring other people to try too. Each person here today has their own battle to win." Emily nodded, understanding perfectly. It wasn't about medals or recognition. It was about showing that there's always a way, even when everything seems impossible. Josh's success in the parasports competition opened new doors for the Butterfly Wings Foundation. Invitations for lectures and participation in events began to appear, and the story of the unlikely family that formed from an encounter at the airport continued to inspire people across the country. On a sunny morning, Emily arrived at Nouvelle Institute for another day of work and found a surprise. The classroom was decorated with posters and balloons. Julia, her first student, had secured her first job as a professional makeup artist. "It's all thanks to you," Julia said, moved, her wheelchair decorated with colorful ribbons. "You showed me that our dreams don't need to have limits." The improvised celebration gathered students, teachers, and clients of the institute. Josh was there, of course recording everything on his canvases. His paintings now decorated not only the institute, but also hospitals and rehabilitation centers throughout the city, bringing color and hope to those who needed it most, including Central Heights Hospital, where several of his paintings had been acquired. "You know what's most amazing?" Josh commented while painting. "Each story I portray makes me remember the day we met, how a small gesture can trigger so many transformations." Emily smiled, observing the Institute's students in their activities. Each one carried a story of overcoming. Each had found their own way to fly. The afternoon brought an important meeting at the foundation. Richard had secured a partnership with a national chain of gyms to create adapted physical activity programs. The pilot project would be based on Josh's experience with the hand cycle. "We want you to lead this project, Emily," Richard announced during the meeting. "Your training in physical therapy, combined with your experience at the foundation, is exactly what we need." Emily felt the weight of responsibility, but also the excitement of the opportunity. "We can start with experimental classes," she suggested. "Invite people like Josh to share their experiences." Mrs. Susan, who now actively participated in foundation meetings as a consultant, added with her increasingly clear speech, "We need to show that physical activity is for everyone." The idea quickly took shape. In a few weeks, the first adapted gym was ready for inauguration. The space had specially developed equipment and a team trained to attend to people with different types of disabilities. Josh was invited to be the poster boy for the project. His photos training, along with excerpts from his story, decorated the gym's walls. But he wanted more. He wanted to transform that space into a living gallery of overcoming. "We can create a collaborative mural," he proposed, enthusiastic. "Each student can contribute with their story, whether through photos, texts, or art." The idea transformed into an even bigger project. Emily and Josh began to organize art therapy workshops at the gym, combining physical activity with artistic expression. The result was surprising. People who had never held a brush discovered in art a new form of expression. One of these stories particularly touched Emily. A young woman named Anna, who had lost the movement of her arms in an accident, learned to paint with her mouth. Her first painting, a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, became a symbol of the project. "Before, I thought my life was over," Anna shared during one of the workshops. "But here, seeing so many people moving forward, I discovered that each obstacle is actually an invitation to reinvent our path." Richard observed the development of the project with paternal pride, not only for the success of the initiative, but mainly for the transformation he saw in his son. Josh had become a mentor for many of the participants, sharing not only his painting techniques, but mainly his journey of self-discovery. "You created something extraordinary here," Richard said to Emily one afternoon as they watched a class in progress. "It's not just an inclusion project, it's a transformation movement." Emily observed the room full of people exercising, talking, painting. Each face told a story. Each smile was a victory over adversities. In one corner, Mrs. Susan helped a lady with strengthening exercises, her words of encouragement echoing through the room. "I didn't create anything alone," Emily replied, moved. "Each person here contributed with a piece of this story. It's like that first painting of Josh's, remember? The wheelchair with butterfly wings. We all have wings, sometimes we just need help discovering how to use them." The day ended with a small presentation by the students. Each one showed their progress, whether in physical exercises, in art, or simply in the confidence to face new challenges. Josh, in his corner, recorded everything in another one of his inspiring canvases. "You know what I love most about these moments?" he commented to Emily while cleaning his brushes. "It's seeing how each person here is writing their own story of overcoming, and to think that it all started with a bottle of water at the airport." Emily's first semester at physical therapy college was coming to an end, and with it came the presentations of the semester's final projects. She had chosen a topic that united her experience at the foundation with her studies: art as a therapeutic tool in physical rehabilitation. The presentation room was packed. In the front row, her improvised family occupied special seats, Josh with his camera, always at the ready, Richard trying to disguise his paternal pride, and Mrs. Susan, who could now walk with the help of a cane, smiling serenely. When I began this journey, Emily started her presentation, I was just a desperate young woman trying to give a better life to my mother. I never imagined that an encounter at an airport would change not only my life, but that of so many other people. She presented success cases from the gym's art therapy program, including Anna's, who now taught mouth painting to other students. The photographs showed the physical and emotional progress of the participants, proving how art could be a powerful ally in the rehabilitation process. True therapy, she concluded, isn't just in the exercises or techniques we apply. It's in the ability to make someone believe that it's possible to start over, that it's possible to find new paths. The presentation was a success. Her professors were impressed with how she had managed to unite theory and practice, creating a program that already showed concrete results. After the presentation, while organizing her materials, Emily was surprised by an unexpected visit. Amanda, the owner of Nouvelle Institute, had attended the presentation and was accompanied by representatives from an important association of physical therapists. "Emily," Amanda began, "they were impressed with your project. They want to implement similar programs in rehabilitation centers across the country." The news was surprising, but what came next was even more special. Josh approached with a painting covered by a cloth. "I made something to celebrate your success," he said, removing the cloth with a flourish. The painting showed a scene from Nouvelle Institute, Emily teaching a wheelchair-bound student to apply makeup while in the background other people practiced different activities. But the most impressive thing was how Josh had captured the light on the faces of the characters. Each one radiated a kind of inner glow, a strength that transcended physical limitations. "This is how I see our work," Josh explained. "Each person we help is like a light that turns on, and that light goes on illuminating other lives." Mrs. Susan, supported by her cane, approached to admire the painting. "My daughter," she said, her voice clear and emotional, "you transformed our pain into hope." Richard, who observed the scene, added, "And that hope is spreading. We've received invitations to open foundation units in other cities. People from all over the country want to know our methodology." Emily looked at her unlikely family, at the painting that so perfectly captured the essence of their work, at the smiling faces that surrounded her. She remembered the day she sold her cell phone to buy a plane ticket, how scared and uncertain she was about the future. "You know what I've learned throughout this entire journey?" she said, her voice soft but firm. "That sometimes we need to lose everything to find something much greater, that the greatest blessings can come disguised as challenges, and that family isn't just the one we're born into, but also the one we choose to build along the way." Josh smiled, adjusting his position in the chair. "And that sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you for a whole world of possibilities to open up." The afternoon sun came through the college windows, creating a play of light and shadow that made Josh's painting seem even more alive. In that moment, Emily was certain, no matter how many challenges might still come, she was exactly where she should be, doing exactly what she should do. Josh's first day at regular school arrived loaded with expectations. Emily accompanied him as his therapeutic assistant, a function that now mingled with the role of older sister she had naturally assumed. "Nervous?" she asked, helping him organize the materials in his adapted backpack. "A little," Josh admitted, adjusting the position of his chair. "But it's a good nervous, you know, like before the hand cycle competition." The school had prepared to receive him. Ramps were installed, adapted desks were provided, and the teachers had undergone special training coordinated by the Butterfly Wings Foundation. Richard insisted on accompanying them that first morning. His face tried to maintain the usual business composure, but his watery eyes betrayed him. "Dad," Josh smiled, "you don't need to worry so much. Emily is with me." The arrival at school caused a buzz among the students. Many already knew Josh through social media and the Foundation's projects. A girl approached timidly. "Hi, Josh," she said, holding a sketchbook. "I saw your paintings at the hospital exhibition. You inspired me to start drawing again after my accident." Josh smiled, recognizing in her the same insecurity he had once felt. How about we paint together during break? The morning flowed better than anyone could have expected. Josh was participative in classes, sharing his knowledge and experiences in a way that impressed even the most skeptical teachers. During the break, a small group formed around him and the girl with the sketchbook, whose name was Lily. They shared drawing techniques, and Josh explained how he had adapted his way of painting after the accident. Emily observed everything from afar, her heart overflowing with pride. Her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Mrs. Susan with a photo. Her mother was at Nouvelle Institute, helping a new student adapt makeup techniques for her motor limitations. She succeeded, said the message, accompanied by a smiley emoji. First, makeup, alone. The small daily victories had become the greatest reward in their lives. Each new step of Mrs. Susan, each new painting by Josh, each smile regained in the Foundation's projects, they were all pieces of a larger mosaic of transformation. During physical education class, Josh surprised everyone. Instead of staying on the sidelines, as many expected, he proposed an inclusive activity he had learned at the adapted gym. Soon, the entire class was involved in a game where wheelchair users and non-wheelchair users participated on equal terms. "Did you see the teacher's face?" Emily commented afterwards while helping Josh store his material. "I think we just created another project for the Foundation." "Can you imagine?" Josh responded, enthusiastic. "We could create an adapted sports program for all schools." The idea quickly gained strength. During lunch, Josh was already sketching in his drawing notebook an outline of what would be an illustrated manual of inclusive physical activities. Richard, who had returned to pick up his son, found him surrounded by colleagues all contributing ideas to the project. His father's heart, which hours before had been tight with worry, now overflowed with pride. At the end of that afternoon, as they returned home, Josh was unusually quiet. "Is everything okay?" Emily asked, concerned. "You know," he began, his voice reflective, "today I understood something important. When I had the accident, I thought my life was over, that I would never be normal again. But today I realize that normal is being able to be who you are, the way you are, and still make a difference in people's lives." Emily felt her eyes water. "And you make a big difference, Josh, more than you imagine." That night, during dinner, Josh formally presented his idea of the adapted sports program for schools. Richard listened attentively, making notes on his tablet. "We can start with a pilot project at your school," he suggested, "and then expand to the public network." Mrs. Susan, who now dined with them almost every night, added, "Each person has a gift to share." Emily observed the scene with a serene smile. There they were, her unlikely family, planning yet another way to transform limitations into possibilities. The fear Josh felt about returning to school had transformed into an opportunity to create something new and meaningful. "You know what impressed me most today?" she commented, serving more juice to everyone. "Seeing how you naturally assumed the role of leader, Josh. You weren't just adapting to school, you were showing everyone a new way of seeing things." Josh blushed slightly at the compliment. "I learned from the best," he replied, casting an affectionate look at Emily. "You taught me that sometimes we need to be the change we want to see in the world." Richard raised his glass in a silent toast. At that dinner table, between smiles and plans for the future, they celebrated not only the success of the first day of class, but the certainty that each new challenge was, in fact, an opportunity to fly even higher. The adapted sports program in schools grew faster than anyone could have imagined. In just 3 months, 10 schools had already joined the project, and the waiting list kept growing. Josh, with his personal experience and natural charisma, had become the perfect ambassador for the initiative. On an especially busy morning, Emily arrived at the gym of Josh's school to find him surrounded by a group of physical education teachers from other institutions. He was demonstrating a new activity he had developed, a kind of adapted basketball that allowed participation from all students. "The secret isn't creating special rules," he explained, maneuvering his chair with dexterity. It's finding a way where everyone's differences become part of the game. Lily, the girl Josh had met on his first day of school, was now part of the project's team of monitors. Her mechanical leg didn't prevent her from demonstrating the exercises, and her talent for drawing had been fundamental in creating the illustrated manuals. "You need to see the difference in the students' self-esteem," she commented to the visiting teachers. "It's no longer about who can or cannot participate, it's about how each one can contribute in their own way." Emily observed everything with a mixture of pride and admiration. The shy boy she had met at the airport had transformed into a young leader, capable of inspiring and mobilizing people. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from Richard. "You won't believe what just happened." At the Foundation's office, the news was waiting for her. An important television network had become interested in their story. They wanted to make a documentary about the transformation that began with an encounter at the airport and now impacted the lives of hundreds of people. "They want to show all facets of the project," Richard explained, excited. "Nouvelle Institute, the adapted gym, the school program, everything." Mrs. Susan, who participated in the meeting, smiled with pride. "Our story will inspire more people." The documentary production began the following week. The cameras followed the daily life of the projects, capturing moments of overcoming and transformation. At Nouvelle Institute, Julia, now an instructor, taught makeup techniques to other women with disabilities. "Before, I thought I needed to hide my limitations," she said to the camera. "Today, I know I can use my experience to help other people feel beautiful again." At the adapted gym, Anna conducted her mouth painting class, while other students exercised on specialized equipment. The walls, covered with Josh's paintings and students' works, told silent stories of overcoming. "Each painting here has a story," Josh explained to the film crew. "They're not just works of art. They're declarations of resistance, of hope, of new beginnings." During the filming at the school, a particularly touching scene caught everyone's attention. A group of students had organized a surprise for Josh, an inclusive art exhibition, where each had contributed a work representing their own journey of overcoming. "You taught us that being different isn't a problem," said one of the students during the inauguration. "It's a unique way of seeing and transforming the world." Emily, observing everything alongside Richard and Mrs. Susan, felt her heart overflow. There was living proof that small acts of kindness could trigger endless waves of transformation. "You know what's most incredible?" Richard commented, his voice choked. "All of this began because a young housekeeper decided to use her last coins to help a stranger." Mrs. Susan, who now walked with ease supported by her cane, completed, "And that stranger became family." That night after filming, the family gathered on the Taylor's terrace. Josh was working on a new painting, a large panel that would be installed at the entrance of the foundation. The work showed a sequence of butterflies emerging from their cocoons, each carrying a different aspect of their collective journey. "Each person who passes through our projects is like one of these butterflies," he explained, applying vibrant colors to the canvas. "They arrive thinking they're trapped in their cocoons but discover they can fly." Emily smiled, remembering her own transformation. From a young woman desperate for help, she had become an agent of change in the lives of so many people, and, most importantly, she had found a family that loved her not despite her limitations, but with all of them. The premiere of the documentary was set for a special event at the largest theater in New York City. Hundreds of people involved in the Butterfly Wings Foundation projects had been invited, transforming the occasion into a true celebration of human resilience. Emily adjusted the gala dress that Richard had insisted on giving her while watching. Mrs. Susan being made up by Julia. Her mother, elegant in a navy blue ensemble, radiated a confidence that seemed impossible just a few months ago. "You look beautiful." "Daughter," Mrs. Susan smiled, admiring Emily in the mirror. Josh was in his room, making the final adjustments to his outfit with Richard's help. The tuxedo had been specially adapted to facilitate his movements in the chair, and a small golden butterfly adorned his lapel, a gift from Emily. "Nervous?" Richard asked, adjusting his son's tie. "A little," Josh admitted. "But it's different now. Before I was afraid of what people would think of me." Today, I know our story can help other people find their way. The theater was packed. In the front row, students from Nouvelle Institute, the adapted gym and partner schools anxiously awaited. Lily, wearing a dress that highlighted her decorated prosthetic leg with colorful paintings, coordinated a group of young artists who had prepared a special presentation. Before the screening of the documentary, there would be a small ceremony. Richard took the stage to make the opening, but surprised everyone by calling Emily, Josh, and Mrs. Susan to join him. "Tonight is not just about a documentary," he began, his voice loaded with emotion. "It's about how fate sometimes uses mysterious ways to bring together people who need each other." Emily felt Josh hold her hand. On the other side, Mrs. Susan leaned on her cane, her eyes shining with pride. "When my son had the accident," Richard continued, "I thought our life was over. I closed myself in a bubble of fear and protection. But then, in a busy airport, a young woman with just a few coins in her pocket taught us the true meaning of wealth." The audience was in absolute silence, absorbing every word. Emily didn't just help my son that day. She showed us that family isn't just the one we're born into, but also the one we choose to build. Together with Mrs. Susan, they transformed our house into a home again. Josh moved his chair forward, taking the microphone. "Before Emily appeared in our lives, I lived in a cocoon of self-pity. I thought I could never be happy, create, dream again. But she showed me that our limitations are just invitations to find new paths." Lily stood up from the audience, followed by other young people. Each carried a small light, creating a choreography they had secretly rehearsed. "Today," Josh continued, "I'm not just a boy in a wheelchair. I'm an artist, an athlete, a student. And mainly I'm someone who learned that he can help others find their own light." Mrs. Susan, surprising everyone, walked without her cane to the microphone. Her voice, once hesitant, sounded clear and strong. "My daughter sold everything to give me a better life, but what she didn't know is that by helping others, she gave us much more than any material wealth." The lights in the audience began to multiply. Each person present lit a small lamp that had been distributed at the entrance, creating an ocean of luminous points. Emily, moved, observed that demonstration of unity and hope. Each light represented a life touched, a story transformed, a dream reborn. "And now," Richard resumed, "before we watch the documentary, we have a special announcement. The Butterfly Wings Foundation is expanding. We're going to open centers in 5 states, taking our programs to people who need to discover that they too can fly." The audience exploded in applause. Josh smiled, his hands already itching to paint that scene. The theater illuminated by hundreds of small lights, each representing a story of overcoming. Emily looked at her unlikely family gathered on stage. The businessman who had opened not just his home but his heart. The young man who transformed his art into an instrument of healing. Her mother, who had been reborn along with her. And all those people in the audience, each carrying a bit of the light they had found together. The documentary was about to begin, but Emily knew that the real story, the story of how love can transform lives, would continue to be written long after the theater lights went out. The documentary began with images of the viral airport video. The scene, now so familiar, gained new depth with the narration that contextualized that decisive moment. The security cameras had captured not just an act of kindness, but the beginning of a silent revolution. The story unfolded on the screen, showing the gradual transformation of each character. Mrs. Susan relearning to speak and walk, Josh rediscovering his passion for art, Emily balancing studies and work, Richard opening his heart to new possibilities. Between the main scenes, moving testimonials from people impacted by the Foundation's projects created a mosaic of stories of overcoming. Julia talked about how Nouvelle Institute had restored her self-esteem. Anna showed her mouth paintings while explaining how art had become her new voice. The audience reacted intensely to each moment. Laughter, tears, and spontaneous applause punctuated the screening. In the scene where Josh participated in his first hand cycle competition, the entire theater vibrated, as if they were watching the moment live. Lily, seated in the front row, couldn't contain her tears when seeing her own story being told. How the encounter with Josh at school had transformed her relationship with her prosthesis, which she now proudly displayed as a work of art. The documentary also showed the behind the scenes of the projects, the foundation meetings, the training at the adapted gym, the classes at Nouvelle Institute, the art therapy sessions. Each scene revealed how small daily actions could create profound changes. A particularly touching sequence showed Mrs. Susan helping other people with speech difficulties, using her own experience to encourage them. Her evolution was clear, from the halting words of the first days to the complete sentences she now pronounced with growing confidence. Josh appeared at several crucial moments, painting with other young people at school, teaching adapted art techniques, participating in sports competitions. His transformation from a reclusive adolescent into an inspiring leader was one of the narrative's guiding lines. Emily observed everything with a lump in her throat. Seeing her story there on the big screen was surreal. The young housekeeper who had sold her cell phone to try for a better life had become a catalyst for transformations. The documentary was coming to an end with an especially significant scene: the inauguration of a new wing at the rehabilitation center, entirely dedicated to art therapy. The walls were covered with paintings by Josh and his students, each work telling a story of overcoming. When the lights came on, the entire theater was standing. The applause was deafening. Richard, Emily, Josh, and Mrs. Susan were called back to the stage, where they were surprised by a special presentation. A group of students from the adapted sports program had prepared a choreography. Among them, wheelchair users, amputees, and people with different types of disabilities moved in perfect harmony, proving that dance, like life, knew no limits. Lily came on stage with a gift, a handcrafted book containing drawings and testimonials from all the students impacted by the Foundation's projects. On the cover, a single phrase summarized everyone's feeling: "You taught us to fly." Josh leafed through the book emotionally, recognizing in each page the reflection of the transformation he himself had experienced. His hand found Emily's, a silent gesture of gratitude. Richard took the microphone one last time. This documentary is not a period, it's just the beginning of a new chapter. From today, the Butterfly Wings Foundation commits to opening its doors in every state capital, because we believe everyone deserves the chance to discover their wings. The announcement was received with a new wave of applause. Emily looked at her family on stage, at the emotional audience, at the lights that still shone like stars in the hands of those present. Each light was a promise that the story that began at that airport would continue to multiply, touching more lives, creating more possibilities. That night, under the theater lights, it wasn't just Emily, Josh, Richard, and Mrs. Susan who shone. It was the certainty that love, when shared, has the power to transform not just lives, but the entire world. A year had passed since the documentary's premiere. The Butterfly Wings Foundation now maintains centers in 12 American cities, each adapted to the specific needs of its region. Emily coordinated the national expansion while completing her final year of physical therapy college. On a sunny spring morning, she arrived at the Foundation's headquarters in New York to find a surprise. The lobby was decorated with hundreds of paper butterflies, each containing a message of gratitude from people impacted by the projects. "It was Josh's idea," Richard explained, watching Emily read the messages emotionally. "He spent weeks coordinating with all the centers to gather these stories." Josh appeared soon after, maneuvering his chair with his usual dexterity. At 17, he had become not only a recognized artist, but a symbol of resilience for young people across the country. "We need to record each story," he said, adjusting his adapted camera. "Each person who passes through here leaves a bit of themselves and takes a bit of us." The Foundation's work had evolved in unexpected ways. The adapted sports program in schools was now public policy in 3 states. Nouvelle Institute had transformed into a network of professional training centers for people with disabilities, with courses that went far beyond the beauty area. Mrs. Susan, who now directed the family support program, entered the room supported by her cane decorated with Josh's paintings. Her speech, although still presenting small hesitations, had become clear and strong. "We have news," she announced, her eyes shining with satisfaction. "The Department of Education wants to implement our art therapy program in all public schools across the country." The news was extraordinary, but for Emily, the greatest victory was in the small daily moments, like that morning when a young woman in a wheelchair entered the foundation for the first time, her eyes downcast and insecure, and found not just welcome, but possibilities. "You know what moves me the most," Josh commented, photographing the paper butterflies. "Seeing how each person who arrives here sad and closed ends up transforming into someone who also wants to help others." It was true. Julia, for example, now commanded a self-makeup program for women with disabilities that had already trained more than 200 professionals. Lily had transformed her experience with the prosthesis into an adapted body art project that traveled across the country. Richard observed everything with a mixture of pride and admiration. The businessman who previously dedicated himself only to business now found his greatest satisfaction in seeing lives being transformed. "Emily," he called, his voice soft, "remember when you told me you just wanted to give a better life to your mother?" She nodded, remembering that first conversation in the tailor's mansion. "Look how many better lives you helped create," he continued, gesturing to the butterflies that decorated the environment. "Each of these messages is a story of new beginnings." Josh approached with his newest painting, a work he had kept secret for weeks. It was an impressive triptych. The first panel showed the moment at the airport, the second portrayed different scenes of the Foundation's projects, and the third was different. "The third panel is blank," he explained, noticing Emily's questioning look. "Because our story is still being written. Each person who passes through here adds their own color, their own way of flying." At that moment, a group of students from the adapted sports program arrived for their swimming class. Among them, a little girl with Down syndrome who had learned to swim there and now dreamed of competing in the Paralympics. "Aunt Emily!" She ran to hug Emily. "Look what I learned to do!" The girl took from her backpack a colorful drawing, a butterfly made with hands, a technique she had learned in the art therapy classes. "It's beautiful," Emily exclaimed, genuinely moved. "It's not just a drawing," the girl explained with the wisdom peculiar to children. "It's a promise that I'll keep flying, just like you taught me." Mrs. Susan, who observed the scene, approached with firm steps. "Each small flight is a great victory." Emily looked around, at the paper butterflies that told stories of overcoming, at Josh photographing each special moment, at Richard organizing the expansion of projects, at her mother, who had become an example of new beginnings. There, in that space that overflowed with love and possibilities, she understood that her journey had been just the beginning. Each person who passed through the Foundation took with them not just support or training, but the certainty that it was possible to reinvent their own story. The great national parasports competition was about to begin. New York's Olympic Stadium overflowed with energy and emotion. In the area reserved for athletes, Josh adjusted his hand cycle, surrounded by his family. Emily checked the equipment, one last time, now with the confidence of a graduated physical therapist. Mrs. Susan helped organize the special uniform that the entire Butterfly Wings Foundation team would wear. White t-shirts with colorful butterflies on the back, each one unique, like the stories they represented. "Nervous?" Emily asked, adjusting Josh's helmet. "Anxious," he replied, smiling, "but in a good way. Today I'm not competing just for myself." It was true. In the stands, dozens of young people from the Foundation's projects waited anxiously, some in wheelchairs, others with prostheses, each carrying their own story of overcoming. For them, Josh wasn't just a competitor. He was living proof that dreams know no limits. Richard arrived carrying a surprise, the trophy Josh had won in his first competition a year ago. "To remember how far you've flown," he said, hugging his son. The competition began. Josh maintained a strong and constant rhythm, exactly as he had trained. In the stands, Emily held her mother's hand, both cheering with their hearts in their throats. But it wasn't just a race happening there, it was the celebration of all the stories that intertwined on that track. Each completed lap was a victory not just for Josh, but for all who had learned to transform challenges into opportunities. When Josh crossed the finish line in first place, the stadium exploded in applause. But the most emotional moment was yet to come. Instead of going straight to the podium, he pedaled to the stands where his extended family was, not just Emily, Richard, and Mrs. Susan, but all the students and teachers from the Foundation's projects. "This victory is ours," he declared, his voice amplified by the microphone someone handed him. "Of all who once thought they couldn't dream anymore, but discovered they could fly." On the stadium's big screen, images from the documentary began to play. The airport encounter, the first Foundation projects, the stories of overcoming that multiplied. The music accompanying the images was a special composition created by a group of students from the music therapy project. Emily observed everything with tears in her eyes. From a young housekeeper who had sold her only possession to try for a better life, she had become part of something much bigger. It wasn't just about transforming her own life or her mother's. It was about creating infinite possibilities for people who, like her, just needed an opportunity to shine. Mrs. Susan, who now spoke fluently, took the microphone. "When my daughter sold that cell phone, I thought we were losing our last link to the world, but in reality, we were about to connect with thousands of hearts." Richard hugged Josh, who was still breathing heavily from the race. "You taught me to be a better father, son, and together with Emily and Mrs. Susan, you showed me that family is much more than blood. It's love in action." The butterflies on the t-shirts of those present seemed to come alive under the afternoon sun. Each represented a story of transformation, a life touched, a dream realized. Josh took his brushes, he always carried them with him, and began to add colors to the third panel of his triptych, the one he had purposely left blank. "Our story has no end," he said as he painted, "because each person who discovers their wings becomes capable of helping others find theirs." Emily looked at her unlikely family gathered there, the businessman who opened his heart, the young artist who transformed limitations into art, her mother who had been reborn along with her, and all those people who now were part of her story. "You know what I learned throughout this journey?" she said, her voice loaded with emotion. "That sometimes we need to lose everything to find something much greater. That love, when multiplied, has the power to create infinite possibilities of flight." The butterflies continued their silent dance on the t-shirts, in the paintings, in the smiles, and there, under the open sky of New York,